morning, Financial Task Force. Thanks for joining again, picking right back up. We had some success on Saturday, and I think most of the time for this meeting, I just want to recap, debrief, and talk about what gaps still exist before heading into the annual meeting. So, and there is an audit that is still in draft form, or sorry, an audit RFP, excuse me, an RFP to solicit a different auditing group. And I have asked a community member and they need more time. So, and I know Chip has just gotten back and I think his knowledge is important around that. And also, if we anticipate we're going to reach that threshold for a single audit, I don't know if we know that, but I think that is a big part of the RFP. And so there's just some questions that are still out there, and I don't want to take up the time this morning with everybody to kind of go in circles. So if that's okay, I was just going to mostly debrief and kind of focus what we can effectively do this morning. So yes, any other addition or any other topics? I know that they might come up in the what gaps still exist category, but anything else on people's mind, then I can make note of it to make sure we cover it this morning.
Yeah, I was interested in having us go through that line by line budgeting, which the financial committee never did because we had other things to do, but we never did that. And the budget vote is coming up soon. And if there's something that anybody on the committee thought we should look at, I think that's important to do if we have time today.
I don't know if we'll have time to do that, but I think that could be an important practice maybe next week after the department heads have finalized, taken the feedback from, because this is budget week for them, correct? And so they are really finally, I think, going to put forward their best estimate. And I think from there, that's a good reminder though to do the deep dive and ask questions. So Rick, do you think that the department heads have final touches to make, or do you think we could send around the final budget like maybe later this week and give time for people to review it so that we don't have to spend exactly this meeting, but rather bring up questions about line items?
Yeah, good question. I think actually that we had a almost 2-hour meeting yesterday with the department heads, and I don't see substantial changes coming. Carrie is doing some very final tinkering. So I think we should be able to provide that copy, which is going to be very similar, almost exactly similar. It's really just anything that we're trying to still catch. So for instance, Chip has agreed to do a deep dive and make sure that Carrie's formulas are all working the way they're supposed to, and that he doesn't see anything that's obviously kind of out of whack or something we should question. And I also heard as I was walking the parking lot last night from at least one council member that they have some questions that I think they'd like to put to the department heads, not so much to try and change the draft, but to help with conversation when the council considers the draft. So I'm actually thinking I'll write a note to each one of the council members today, asking if there are things they would like the department heads to explore this week as possibilities, without necessarily changing the draft that the department heads are putting in front of the council, but just to be better prepared for that meeting. So those are the two things I'm thinking of at the moment. So yes, I guess the short answer is I think Carrie can probably get something to you all certainly by the end of the week. I think, I should ask you, Chip, what's your life like this week? Because I know you and Carrie were going to do some work on this before we call it something that we're ready to really present to council.
So we'll do our best to see what we can do.
Okay, so there you go. I think by the end of the week, you should have something that you could then do a deep dive on as a finance team next week.
Great.
Okay.
Great.
Hey, just had a question on the budget real quickly. I remember, Rick, you'd mentioned, do everything that you're planning to do as cost effectively as possible. And this is the first year we're doing budgeting this way. Was there any ask like, hey, can you look to cut X amount or anything? Were there any goals set of how they can, possibly be cost conscious? Or is this just such a new process that let's focus on doing it right one time and then get better later on?
So that was the heart of our conversation yesterday as department heads. We went around and around in circles about kind of what is the useful way to try and approach that question. And the truth is that, as I look at the budget, I don't see a lot of fat that can just be cut from normal operations. So if we're having a conversation in which we want to say to them, for the thought exercise, tell us where you would cut 5% of the budget. It would be intriguing, I suppose, to see the answer to that. But as we talked about it as a group, really, as we could see on Saturday, in the vast majority of instances, that means one of two things is going to happen. Three. I can think of 3 ways we would go about that. We can't touch loans. That's done, right?
Yep.
We know what the cost of debt is. So the only ways we could do that really are to talk about cutting staff, which means we are impacting our ability to serve the community at the current level. Our staffing is actually less now than it was 5 years ago. We have gone down in staffing as costs have gone up. So I'm not anxious to put that option in front of people because I think we've got staff that are doing a pretty fine job, and I think they're providing a level of service that this community needs. So the second area would be capital, and I think that's one that is worth exploring because it's a judgment call. How much are we hurting ourselves down the road if we cut back on trying to rebuild our capital reserve early, right? Or should we delay that for a year because we're in the midst of a lot of pain right now around the assumption of loans and that kind of thing. So those two, and the only other way that you can do it is something that I found myself caught in previous organizations where I was managing large budgets, which is I say to somebody, we can't do this, come back to me with a 5% lower budget. And they come back having trimmed 5% from every one of their categories, which they had a pretty good estimate on what it was going to cost to do, maintenance, utilities, whatever. And so in fact, all we end up doing is under budgeting the real cost of running the operation.
Yeah.
So I don't think we want to go that direction either. So we went around and around in circles for it was about 1 hour and 45 minutes yesterday, and finally agreed that while we're open to thoughtful questions, both from the council and from the community about specifics, we don't, they've gone around, I think we cut one full staff person that Travis was hoping for in PD next year that currently is not filled, which he had budgeted for this year and he was budgeting for next year. We cut that entirely. And that's the only staffing position other than the cuts we made this year already, which were, we went from a full-time employee who was costing us nearly $7,000 a year for custodial work in the building here to a part-time operation that's going to be 10 to 15 hours a week at $20 an hour for custodial services. So we've saved a fair amount of money there. But they've answered those questions, I think.
Fair enough. I just wanted to make sure we asked the question.
Yeah, and I don't mean to sound defensive. I'm just trying to share the insights of.
Oh, no. You were not defensive at all.
Okay.
The other thing I was a bit concerned about was something Paul raised at the water and sewer meeting, and that is, this is almost the first time we've had grant money put into the budget. And what happened in one instance, at least for about $500,000, is we put it into expenses, but we forgot to add it to income. And I'm afraid that since I'm not savvy on every possible place that could happen in the budget, that I will miss it if I go to check it. I hope that, and I trust that Carrie can do it. But I just remember to check and make sure that every place we've entered an expense for a grant, that we put it into income as well. Please.
Yes, it should be a wash, and I think that's where we stand at the moment.
Frank checked it, but Chip will also be checking it as he's going through my budget.
So to be clear on grants, not all grants are 100%. So I have seen practices where they budget $200,000 in expense for a structures project for highway with an anticipated 150,000 coming in as a reimbursement because it's a 75-25 grant. And then the grant doesn't come through, so we never get the revenue, and we also never spend the money. So naturally, 50 grand is raised in taxes that ends up in the fund balance in the end. If it's
Yeah,
a straight in and out.
Carrie, am I right that I don't think we got
I
anything
think
like
we
that
have
this year?
one that's like $12,000, and then the municipal planning grant is like $3,000. I think those are the only.
But
I wanna
the municipal planning grant is a done deal. That one has already been approved, so.
Yeah, and I think we're actually going to get a grant to cover that. Anyway.
So this year, yes, I think that's right, Chip. And this year, I think we're talking about a very, very tiny amount of money like that.
Right.
I'm not sure if
But-
it's just me, but when Carrie speaks, it doesn't come through very well. I don't know if that's just a me issue or,
No.
and,
You couldn't
Yeah.
hear her here at all.
It's
Okay.
the camera.
yeah.
What flashed up on my screen was the quote, internet connection was unstable. So
That'd be me.
yeah,
I'm unstable.
no comment.
Well, that might be.
Oh. And this, sorry, Susie, to bring up the question that you were asking and raised during the budget workshop on Saturday, but you had like around, I think it was loans and accounting those for income versus even though they're kind of an expense. Did you want to raise that question here? Or is it kind of related? I didn't want to butcher it, but.
Yeah, no, thank you for reminding me. Because I think in the budget, which I don't have in front of me, we did count loan money as income, but we don't count debt service as an expense on that money, at least at the department level, right? I guess, did you say it rolls up to the general, but like, it's a bit, I don't want to say misleading, but I think it's very important to see what impact debt service has to each and every department if the department is benefiting from that specific loan. So if we're going to report a loan as income, which that's like saying I'm taking I'm getting a home equity loan to pay off my credit cards. I'm not counting that as income. Like that's money that's I'm paying for a dead horse.
Right.
So I don't think that that's a really great illustration, but I think maybe it's a municipal accounting
Don't we have
process.
to do that for double accounting? I mean, isn't that standard double accounting? You have to have something on both sides of the equation. I'm thinking more, personal finance or, corporate finance. I mean, that's money that's coming in. So, but then we also have to account for it as a debt. So,
Like the expense of the,
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, because it is truly money coming in. So we have to account for it as an income, but
right.
it costs us more on the debts, on the asset. So it's coming in as an asset, but it also creates a liability. So we have to have both sides of the equation. We can't just have one or the other because we're going to spend the money, somewhere at some point. So it has to be on both sides of the formula.
So general government funds do treat borrowed money as proceeds from loans. And then that year that you borrow, you show an expense that may or may not have even been budgeted. And then for the financial audit, the loan is listed segregated from your financial statements as long-term debt through the audit process. Long-term debt does not typically show up in a general fund balance sheet. But all enterprise funds, when you borrow, it's directly to the liability. And if you get grant money, it's directly to an income. So there are two different methods based upon the type of fund that is involved. And then the full accrual reporting that an audit may show for the general fund would explain why, when you're looking at the financials one way, you see this $500,000 of revenue, but in accrual that became a liability of $500,000 instead. From an accounting standpoint, both of those are credit entries, but one clearly rolls forward to next year to start the year and the other one does not. So it is a function of governmental accounting in the way It just looks weird. When I borrow money, it's a liability, but when the city borrows money, it's revenue.
Exactly. All right, that makes sense. I figured there was some sort of
Nuance.
different rule for municipal accounting.
Right. All right, these are good questions. Any other lingering, well, yeah, okay. Let's begin debrief and then this might spin into other directions, but I do want to be mindful of
Can I
time.
throw in one other thing?
Yeah,
before we
yeah.
go? It would be really helpful, I think, if this team could start a shared document in which we lift up frequently asked questions that we can, over the next week, craft into an FAQ that could be both helpful to council and in the end, whenever the council approves something to go to the voters, helpful to voters, that could, kind of accompany the budget. And we even wondered yesterday in our department head meeting whether this year we ought to include that FAQ right in the annual report this year to answer common questions. I'm just thinking, I've got a dozen of those questions in my head right now, and I don't want to get so arcane that we're answering questions that, really nobody has or only one person has. But I do think that there are, 8 or a dozen questions at least that are kind of logical questions anybody would ask, that it would be smart for us to have an understanding of, to offer an understanding of moving forward. So if we could try and work on that together, I think it would be a stronger document.
So in the annual report, a page in advance of the presented budget, I typically would put in next year budget notes, which are the equivalency of Q&A, but they're instead just listed a bunch of facts that relate to how the budget was developed, highlighting that we know the amount to be raised by taxes going up by $600,000, and this is primarily as a result of, and you name what caused that to happen as a single line. And then other considerations that took place were showing additional principal and interest expenses because of debts that either were never reported from prior years or we have taken on in the last fiscal year. And that basically leads people to look for those lines and be provided the explanation of those lines. That doesn't stop them from looking at other lines, but you preempt the big ticket items with facts about what developed the budget in these areas.
That sounds like exactly what was in my head. So it's good to know that that's kind of a typical.
Yeah, and you do it really as bullet points as opposed to here's the question, here's the answer.
Got it.
So knowing that Jim will want that at the end of the month. Sounds like
budget. That's right.
Well, ideally, like I said, if you're going to present the final results of the budget to city council, you have this as the lead up to that same document they're going to look at.
exactly.
And so then if the public gets the annual report and asks a council member something, it's something they've already seen or been exposed to.
So I think I want to phrase it as homework without triggering anybody, but homework would be to share the budget and then create your own bullet points. Like, what do you think stands out? What do you could form it as questions that you've heard from your neighbors, or you could just say, this is a really important figure. Notice how we have consolidated expenses or moved the public works director, salaries into one bucket. So you're going to see that go up. But then the following bullet would be how we are dealing with that. So I think if everybody, as you review the budget, kind of make those notes, and then we can come together and kind of have a really robust discussion around the budget, the final budget, and what the takeaways are and what that fact sheet will look like. That sounds like a good process?
Yes.
So that also might feel like more of than an hour of a meeting though. So I want to be sensitive.
Yes.
if it was next Wednesday, the 21st, it would run long. And I want everybody to have a chance. Like, I would like everybody to be in this conversation, but if it went from 8 to 9:30, does that include everybody in this conversation, or would that eliminate anybody? And do we need to find an alternative time? And everybody can just
Consider that you've got 2,000 lines of revenue and expense to go over.
Yep.
You're not going to touch a line every 2.2 seconds.
Yep.
So you're not going to get through line by line. That's where an individual can sit down for 5 hours and go through it, highlight the questions they have on any given line to be reviewed. But to specifically say, why in the clerk's office is the postage budget going from $500 to $525? Well, that's the reason we consolidated, because in the department head meeting, I said, if you're going to really talk about cutting something and $37,000 is a penny on the tax rate, don't talk to me about $200 changes, because that doesn't impact the tax rate. You got to be in the 10,000 plus to begin to have a value on the tax rate that is meaningful.
So Lori, I think you're talking about, you're muted. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just realized I was on mute. And that's a really good point, Chip, that actually should probably go there somewhere. 37,000 increase equals 1 penny on the tax rate, so that people do understand
Scale.
how that works, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and I typically I typically would put together a page that says, here's the comparison of last year's aggregate numbers to this year's aggregate numbers. And if the grand list doesn't change at all, here's what happens to the estimated tax rate.
Mhm.
And the reason it's always estimated is that the grand list does in fact change. But you can't compare apples to oranges with what you think the grand list is going to come in at. You got to compare it with the last known.
And we have fewer employees at the city level than we did 5 years ago. But our taxes are 20% higher than they were so I think people are going to probably come in and want just sort of a snapshot explanation of that. When the grand list drops, our staffing should drop, like in alignment with it, to keep the costs relatively stable. So
The part you're missing, Susie, is the skyrocketing cost of materials, gas, utilities.
so it's inflation.
Inflation is what's really driven this over the last 5 years. It's been through the roof.
And COVID.
And well, yeah, I mean,
COVID inflation.
and its relation to COVID. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, it might be worthwhile trying to include a point about this on the fact sheet, the FAQ or the bullet point sheet. I want to go back and make sure that my numbers are precise. Like I want to do it. But as I look back, and I've talked with Travis about how many employees he had 5 years ago, 6 years ago in 2020, and how many he has now, and I look at the cuts. I mean, we've cut 2 or 3 in the Department of Public Works and Rec Department just since I've been on council in the last 2 years. So I want to make sure that I'm correct about that. I'm speaking from a gut feeling. I haven't done the careful checking, but I think it's true, and it's worth checking so that we can include that information and explain it. Like, if you're right, on the face of it, it makes no sense. If
Right.
staffing is our biggest expense and we're cutting staff in order to try and control expenses, how come we're not seeing the tax rate go down?
Because health insurance went up 45%.
Exactly. And
But didn't we say that our health insurance, we were able to keep pretty stable this year?
Last year, this year, but not 5 years ago.
Yes. So health insurance is not what's driving our increase this year. What's driving our increase this year, and I want to know these actual numbers and put them in the sheet, are the new debt service we're taking on,
Yep.
and the mistakes in budgeting that were being made in the last several years that were under budgeting and creating the accumulated deficit, which we've now addressed. So it doesn't represent a change in our budget. It just represents a change in our level of honesty and transparency about what's really
Right.
going on.
That makes sense.
The other thing over the last 5 years is that the non-union staff came in about 5 years ago and asked for a 7% increase in their salaries. And that that caused the union, and the union is for many more employees than the non-union, to come in. They had to wait a year, but they came in and like gangbusters, and really rightly so, asked for an 8% increase. I believe it was retroactive, and it was for another 3 years. So you may have reduced an employee here or there, but every employee that remained was getting 8% on top of 8% on top of 8%, which increased the cost as well.
And the council at that time was asked, was the money available to cover the non-union staff? And the answer given was, oh, yes, but we know that that money came from accounts it should never have come from.
So I'll just say in response to that, that I trust your memory of kind of how that happened, because I wasn't here, and you've been careful and attentive to that. What I will say, however, is that from an objective standpoint today, I've done a deep dive into the VLCT chart that shows comparable wages in cities paid across the state. And we are in the middle or just below middle across the state. So while it may seem outrageous, that's actually also a function of inflation. We have to pay more in order to be competitive, in order not to lose the employees that we have, because there's a lot of poaching going on out there. So it's all about, at the end of the day, the reason those folks have to make more money is also a function of inflation, right? They have higher expenses, then they can't live on the lower salary.
No, I wasn't condemning anybody other than an initial person,
Right.
but I was saying that that's another
piece of the pie. I agree.
And then the union employees, we really have no control over. There is no haggle. I mean, there is, but there's not.
Well, interestingly, we're about to head into both police department and public works contract negotiations this spring, and that's a 3-year commitment that we've got to make. And I've had initial conversations with the PD folks, and that's going to be a process too, like everything, right? That's and the primary underlying thing that's built on is comps. The police department, the public works program bring the comparables that are being negotiated in cities like ours across the state. We do the same homework and bring those to the table, and then we sit down and negotiate from there.
So in the budget, some number had to be determined as the potential point you're going to land in order to budget 27.
Yes.
Insurance?
No, for wage and so just to be clear, this budget assumes only a 3% increase for next year, and that hasn't yet been negotiated. Though I think if we pass a budget in the process of those negotiations that says this is what we've already budgeted for next year, it actually strengthens our negotiating position.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, I hear that, Chip. I'm totally inexperienced at this, which is why I'm doing it with John Klesch from SPNF, and Andrew, who's been through this kind of stuff in his own life than I have, has been sitting at that table as well.
Yeah.
Which union covers public works?
Oh,
Roll up to.
I can't remember the name. Hold on. I don't know, Susie. I'd have to look for it. It's here in a pile of papers. I haven't started that one yet. I'm doing the PD right now.
Okay, so to recap, we'll get the budget hopefully maybe Thursday or Friday. We're going to line by line review, ask questions, take notes, lift up things that are really important that should be kind of part of this fact bullet point information sheet in the annual report.
How many pages is
Focusing-
the budget? Is that a question, Carter?
I was just going to say, last thing is focusing on line items that are about $10,000 or more are more important. Don't get stuck in the minutia because it will just suck up your weekend, and that's not what we're doing. But we do need to review at least comprehensively, look at it all. What was your question, Hal?
So just to be efficient, kind of an idea, if and this could be arbitrary, or if someone has something they really want, everyone should look it all over, but could you maybe assign to us like certain sections? So instead of us all starting at page 1 and maxing out by page 10 or 20 or whatever, maybe all of us get a certain responsibility for a certain section and say, hey, could you really focus on this part? And then, in the big spectrum, but first focus on this and then maybe the whole thing in general. That way we know we've, as a group, put eyes on the whole thing.
That's a good point. I was thinking about that, like breaking out by department, but I was like, that would be unfair
Whatever it
because
is,
some are.
department or-
But I like I like the just taking like a deep dive. Yeah, that sounds good. What do other people think?
I think that's a great idea.
I
Okay.
think, just so you all know, I think water and sewer is working on that, on those two fronts. So I think if you all focus on
Love
that,
it.
that should be a good spot.
Okay.
Less for us.
Yeah, I
So-
just don't want everyone to like get maxed out and be like, oh, no one made it past page 15 or whatever it is.
No, that's honest and real, and I think a really good way to go about it. So, considering water and sewers got theirs funds covered, we'll deep dive in the general fund. And when Carrie is like feeling good and sending it, I will just, if it's okay, there's
Arbor-
four
I
of
don't care.
us.
I'll trust your judgment to just ask people to do things.
Yes, I was gonna say, so once the page count is determined, and I will divide it into 4. Is that how many people? I see Susie, Lori, Hal, myself. I know Chip and Carrie are doing behind the scenes already checking, so I'll just divide it into 4 and assign. But I do agree that like overall look into it, but then if you within your chunk can do like, okay, this is $5,000, but still you can still ask questions and raise that up, definitely. So that conversation, going back to how it is not going to be able to consolidate it into an hour, does next Wednesday morning, even if it takes like an hour and a half or maybe a little bit more, does that still work for people, or is there a better day? Looking at calendars, it's not good on my end, so that's why. But I just want to make sure that, again, if we're responsible, I want to make sure everybody can report out on there.
So on the 21st, Gary, Rick, Jim, and I are supposed to meet for cash flow conversation at 9 o'clock, but we just have to push that off till 9:30.
Okay.
I'm good.
I can make it happen.
Awesome. All right. Good team. Thank you. And thanks, Anne, for lifting that up. And I think this is all going to be really helpful. And part of that, the covering the gaps that I'm thinking about, because there is a lot to it. And although we had some new faces show up on Saturday, I think the annual report is where a lot of these facts should be. And honestly, it's a really nice record, that, and I don't know how many people in 2 years are going to look back at that video or find the spread or the PowerPoint, but at least the annual report, I think that's really significant and important to state how much progress has been made. So
The new faces, as an FYI, are people who have been well tuned in, or most of them anyway. There were some there that rarely come to meetings for some good reasons, but who certainly watch the videos and used to attend meetings. So there really were not many surprises in who showed up. They may have been new faces to you. I'm sorry.
No, that couple that was sitting at the end of the table with Hal,
Yes.
they just moved here this summer and they're very, very interested in getting involved. So that was excellent.
Yeah, that's 2 people. But most of the others were already tuned in, which is great. I'm glad they were there, because we don't usually see them at meetings. But they're pretty informed.
all right. So kind of segueing into debriefing, and what do you guys think went well and we should replicate in the future? What went well in that?
Really quick. So as far as what you want by the end of the week.
Yeah.
Chip, when do you think you'll be done reviewing my work?
Hopefully by the end of today.
Okay.
But based on the 3 emails I just got, we'll see.
From us?
No,
No,
Like,
no,
do
you're
anything.
just one piece of the puzzle.
So I mean, that I think works then, because I think I'm just like a little bit wondering if I can meet the Friday deadline, but because I think my goal, I'm assuming Hal, Lori, Susie, that you're all fairly comfortable in like Excel or Google Sheets. Is that a safe assumption to make? And that you'd prefer to review it that way than a PDF?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Because I haven't made that available just because I have been kind of protective of my original numbers.
Save it, Carrie, as a
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I think once
or a review sheet or something.
Like
I think
uneditable or something.
reviewing, I'm gonna make a copy that's just values. It doesn't include any of my formulas, so that doesn't get any kind of messiness. And then I can share that version just like within this group. I at a later date could post on the website, like when it's like the end of the month or when we're like nearing the budget conversation. But I think it's gonna be easier for you guys to flip through it in Excel. Is my assumption.
And the actual, sorry to keep asking these questions, the FY26 actual will be.
It's not going to be accurate.
No, okay.
No.
Okay.
But I can provide, in addition to that, an FY26 budget to actual report to cross-reference.
So part of my process is going to be to take what's in the Excel file and load it into the financials, and then I can actually run a report
With the updated actual.
during the last year budget, last year actual, current year budget, current year to date actual, and next year budget directly out of the financial system. Strange. So that so you are looking at
My actual.
what we actually have today as opposed to the spreadsheets information. Because as we know, spreadsheets are typically one cell oriented and subtotaling done by formulas. And in the annual report, they said they summed to zero, but when we got it in the accounting, it was off $1,400. Not that that's significant, but you present it as if it summed zero and it didn't. So
If you can update my FY26 cells, the reason why I haven't been able to, and it's because of the rows that we've added as we've gone and removed.
yeah.
So you know what I'm talking about, but yeah. Anyway, sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure we were all clear on format, and I'll be clear if that timing is not going to work, because honestly, if Chip finds a bunch of stuff we need to talk about, I don't know how long. I mean, it might be like Monday.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Okay, so totally understand. I don't want to work, or I mean, this is going to take time and effort out of and if we're not looking at the best, most clean numbers, then I totally understand wanting to make sure and verify all of that. So TBD on homework assignment date. Okay, any other thoughts around that or anything tangential before we kind of like shift into debrief? Try to end on a good note. That'll be fun, but none. All right.
So
Okay.
one of the things I will produce is that change in amount to be raised by taxes based on the current grand list. I will have that number that says, if all things are considered, here's what the tax rate looks like based on the presently known grand list. Because 9 times out of 10, the bottom line is, what are you doing to my tax bill? And if the grand list doubles, but the tax rate doesn't get split in half and it goes to 2/3, well, the tax rate went down, but so what? It doesn't matter. My bill actually went up.
Mhm.
So that's the type of stuff that I tend to want to present in an annual report, is a recap of why the budget has changed, what are the significant changes, and what's the anticipated impact on the tax rate.
Those are key numbers that I would appreciate your assessment and formulas to find out, because that is ultimately, I think that's one of the gaps we didn't present on Saturday. I mean, not to jump over the positives, but that was one hard thing that I had an issue saying, but at the end of the final end of the day, how is it going to impact your taxes? Because we could say our taxes are going to increase by 10%, but how does that translate? And you're going to help translate that. So I think that's,
Yes.
yeah, thank you. Okay, sorry, taking notes. Put some bullets. Okay, peoples. What went well? I've heard really good things, but I don't know if people are just being nice to me. So how do you guys think? What are some, yeah.
I thought it was so well organized, and the presentations were really good, not verbose. You know, they I thought Lyle was amazing. I thought you and Rick were amazing. And I think that you know, having the food and having sort of, you know, the fellowship and just sort of everybody like the community, I would have loved to have seen more people. And I do feel like getting the word out continues to be a challenge in this city. Not everybody's on Facebook. Not everybody reads the paper. Barely anybody gets it. I mean, anymore, sadly. And, you know, a lot of people don't work in Newport. Maybe they live there, but they don't work there. They have very little reason to go into town because they work in Derby or they work down in Orleans or they, you know. So I think one of the things I'd love to see for future events, you know, I love the idea of just again, like, I'm so old school. I love a newsletter. I love a quarterly newsletter with a calendar saying, here's what's coming. I don't know if any of you are in Community Circle, probably not, you're too young, but they send out, oh, hi, Pam and Ann. Well, but they send out, you know, a quarterly newsletter of upcoming events and also like what's going on in the city. And because again, not everybody is walking around downtown seeing flyers. And I don't even know if we had flyers papered all over Derby or anything for this event on Saturday, but it would have been really cool. And I meant to do it, so shame on me. I was going to put one on the front door of the bank here so that when, you know, customers walk in, they're like, oh, what's going on in Newport? Oh, Saturday. Yeah, I live in Newport. Yeah, maybe I'll go. So little things like that. So I think just getting the word out probably in multiple ways would be useful. I took a social media cleanse for New Year's. So like, I'm not on social media, so I don't see what's going on in Newport. Thank goodness for this team.
I to your point, my wife asked me the question, well, should I have shown up at this? And I was like, you know, it would have added numbers, but would have added qualitative, you know, engagement, things of that nature, because you were just there to support, you know, what we're trying to do versus having the big questions or anything like that. And my thought was having a good, you know, like a baseline where like, hey, we're willing to do this. People have been there. To your point, Susie, where are some other things? Maybe we ask for 3 minutes on Sunday at a bunch of churches or something like that here in town, which, you know, we got to look for, if we can't, you know, we'll put it out on Facebook, but if we have to look for where those focal points are, and this might be part of the job of the group, is we reach out to the religious organizations, say, hey, usually everyone has an announcements time. Can we get 120 seconds at announcements and say, hey, here's what we're doing so that people know what's going on. And we do that a few times, especially for big events, and we just reach out to those organizations. Because to your point, not everyone's going to see it on Facebook and everything like that, but making an honest effort.
Yep.
I like that idea, but you know, especially before a meeting like that, that we try to do something. I mean, I recognize the advertising expense of something like that, but sometimes just getting it, you know, working with, I don't know, the post office or Information Press that has that kind of information where you can hone in on the zip code, you know, and who's getting what, and it's really important. I think when we do this in late spring, I think it's going to be even more important. You know, that will be a big push. And then again, you know, next November, January, whatever we do next year. I love the idea of the quarterly newsletter. But when you do something like this, you got to get it in front of everybody, every family.
So it wasn't, I said churches, but jokingly enough, we also have every service organization. So we have the Elks, everybody, the VFW, the American Legion, blah, blah, blah. All of them have meetings. All of them have attendance. And even if we just pick up one or two here and there, we're going to have quite a few people at the next event. So I think maybe that's something we should plan on is, let's identify the groups we want to go to, identify the people we need to talk to, and we see if we can get on the radar, and we try and make that announcement at least a couple of times.
Newport Rotary once a week.
What,
All the organizations that get money from the city have newsletters.
Mhm.
Oh, that's a good
Yep.
idea. All those are
They could certainly publicize the city in the same way as the city funds them or partially funds them.
Right, like the library. That would be a good one. And that's where, if people aren't on Facebook, they I don't know if that's anyways. Susie, you were going to say something, and also I see Lori, but
Nope.
no, you're good. Lori, did you have a thought?
I just want to say I was pretty pleased with Saturday. The questions were really good that were raised about the budget, the questions to Lyle and, oh gosh, I just drew, what's her name?
Stephanie.
I just lost it. I thought the questions were great. The conversation time downstairs was so great, especially for those of us who got to sit with Stephanie. And I don't know if she changed your mind, but I think she might have helped Patrick along a little bit. But anyway, I thought the day went well. I think the numbers could have been better, but that's something, that's first time's not always going to get the biggest. So
That's what I heard, is folks that were there were like, this is good. And I think people will buy in now that they, maybe they were hesitant to come and dedicate their Saturday to something for the first time. But if their neighbor went, then this spreading through word of mouth in a positive way, hopefully will help bring in more folks when we come to the spring. But I also definitely hear more advertising and getting the word out on all these weird channels that exist in Newport, because it can be improved. And I think if we have more, since we have a little bit of a lead up time, and all of I think just like all of this work that we are doing, y'all, is permeating, and it will, I don't know, I'm feeling really excited about continuing this conversation, especially if we get more people in the room. And I do like the idea of bugging all those service organizations. I will say I did get an email. I posted on Front Porch Forum, and somebody got back to me right away, but really kindly saying, hey, I would love to do this, but this is like the day of the Sabbath and I can't. And I was like, shit. So if maybe an event that is on a weeknight, I know Mondays are off the table, but another night might be better, and just have folks stay, like staff members stay late. I don't know if that would, I don't know if people feel strongly opposite, that that would be harder for people to get in the door, but at least we could maybe try to shift to a different day. And it might, I don't know if that would exclude people though, because they're tired and
there's no perfect time. Let's just accept the fact there's no perfect time. And if we try and you're going to overthink it. You're going to, so pick a time that can best represent the people that need to provide the information.
I have just two quick points. I think one is for the future, I thought the meeting actually went really well. I think for the future, it would be nice to say, if the council could say, as a result of this meeting, we made this change, so that people would know that there was a reason to go to the meetings other than just to learn for themselves, but that they made a difference. Maybe not they personally, but that some piece of information that the council heard was a change. And the second thing I thought of was I liked the fact that you went around the tables and people got to ask their questions, but it might feel more like what they're used to in terms of what a town meeting is if when one person raised a question and an answer was given, other people in the audience who had a similar thing or a comment to make on that, we could build on one area of questioning so that people were contributing. And, you might have to say something ahead of time, like, don't start person number 2, don't start your comment with, boy, that was a stupid idea that person number 1 had. That we were polite about how we did that. But then it was still more like we were building on each other's ideas. It's more like a town meeting.
Yeah, I thought the question, it was really one of my favorite things that I saw was people interacting across the table and looking at the budget, and that whole dialogue is exactly what we were going for. And so, Anne, are you saying, like, say somebody the first question was, how are we doing on collecting taxes? And then the follow-up was, okay, what about delinquent taxes? Would you say, like, I would have been like, anybody else have questions around collecting taxes? And then we move on to the second thing. Am I hearing you right?
Sure.
Okay. Great. Just want to make sure. Because I've not been
to a new event for you, Carter. You haven't learned how to MC something like this.
I know I've not been to because I've only lived in Newport and we've not had a town meeting. And I think later I realized, like, when we brought up the flyer a couple of weeks ago to talk about this event, and we were like, what is the verbiage? And we were calling it budget workshop. But then later I heard Rick say town meeting. And I was just like, oh, that kind of takes on a different meaning and purpose. Although it was structured like a town meeting, it was like a town budget meeting. So in the future, I kind of want to, again, like, revisit that and make sure we fulfill that expectation around what a town meeting can. And then maybe I do also go to a VLC training about how to be a moderator. Not really, don't know, but I
will say, Carter, I really like the way you interpreted what Anne said, which is, okay, so we've had a couple of questions on this issue. Before we move on, does anyone else, because we need to, we spent a lot of time going, okay, where are we going next? Who's going next? And to say, all right, so we've had 2 questions about this. Anyone else in the room have a question before we move to the next topic, or something like that? And then you don't get down the rabbit holes of 20 minutes later you're back visiting the first topic. So if I interpreted that correctly.
And I think something that I would practice and do better on my own is, like, the flowing through the slides, kind of maybe working with the department heads to understand, okay, like, for example, the text slide, I thought that was most significant and they were talking, but then I forgot that there were like 3 to 4 slides after that. And I was like, oh, sugar, So in the future, I want to, like, reference those better so that they flow with the conversation, and also be able to navigate them a little bit more expeditiously when these, like, for example, around, there's a lot of questions around the police budget and, like, how much we're taking in for dispatch services. So be able to, like, quickly go to that pie chart or be able to demonstrate. So, but I think in time we will figure that out, because, like, frequently asked questions, we will maybe be able to foresee some of these. So in practice, I think we'll get a lot better.
I do wonder if when we do this again the next time, that maybe we break it down into the presentation and questions about that section. I thought I heard Mike Brown say something and then forgot to come back to it later. because we waited until the end. So if we know that we're doing, this is the fire presentation questions, this is the police presentation questions, you know, and then you open it up for other questions, you know, at the end. I don't know how people feel about that, but sometimes it can be overwhelming with all the presentations at one time.
Yeah, I think we approached it in the way we did for time, but I definitely also see the value in taking a pause and then like while this information is fresh, and then just overarching questions at the end. Yeah, it's still necessary. So I think, yeah, that's another way to improve upon the engagement aspect and the specificity. Although we got really good questions, and I think as we went through them, it kind of the pattern started to emerge, and but nonetheless, I still think that's like a valuable thing to revisit once we do this again. I agree, Lori. Okay, so
One thing you
Mhm.
did promise, I think, to the emailers, the people who gave you emails, that some answers would be given. Please remember to follow through in some way with regard to that, because if you promise something and you don't deliver it, it falls dead.
for sure. For sure. I think, I wonder if that's kind of what the FAQ questionnaire that Rick had initially brought up probably stemmed from. And yeah, that's a good point. I'll make that note. Okay, any last thoughts around debriefing Saturday?
Hot dogs need to be hotter.
Yeah, I appreciate they had a veggie option for me. That was very sweet and inclusive. So, okay. All right, so be looking out for an email from me and or Carrie, at least CC'd in there for our deep dive. And yeah, I hope you guys have a good rest of your week.
Carter, I just want to add one thing, and I know I'm going to beat this horse until we get it answered, but I know that the council is going to visit at some point before the end of this month the quarterly tax payments, and I know that it was or is going to be in the paper either yesterday or today, I think, as part of the recap of Saturday. But I really do believe that we're going to need some solid backing from Chip, but really from Jim's office to say, you know, these will be the dates. This is, you know, I've had people say, well, how are they going to do that? When would we have it due? And how are people going to know? And this is really super important because I keep saying it. We've based this whole budget on the anticipation of not having to take a loan out to pay, you know, a loan in the anticipation of taxes, right? So that we can get away from paying that interest. I think that was a big thing on Saturday.
Right.
Wow, if we can stop paying $25,000 or whatever it is, whatever the amount is in interest, there's a savings right there, you know, almost a penny. So you know what I mean? And it has to get out there. So even when it's brought to the council, I think there needs to be an explanation of why we're making this change and what the importance of it is.
So it has to be a warrant article voted on by the public. So
Yes.
therefore, the article should have facts behind why the article is being presented by city council.
Right. That's right.
You've never voted on your due dates.
Nope.
Yeah, no, Lori, I actually had that worm in my brain about what are the gaps that still exist because we didn't have a slide. I tried to make a graph. It was on Friday, I admit, out of all the things we're doing. Didn't make it on there because it wasn't clean and I didn't like it. But I still think that, yes, it should be brought up and discussed at city council, just for the record. And again, so that educate everybody as much as we can, but also in the FAQ. And also maybe during February, we bring it up again. Like, how do we get the word out and help everybody understand Besides, again, a few hundred people show up to vote, and most of those are educated, and I want to say informed and watch videos. But how do we reach and make sure everybody is aware of this change and why it's important? But I do also agree, coming from Jim's office would be really helpful. Yeah, and grounding. Go. Was there something from you, Pam?
Yeah, send it out with the water bill, send it out with the tax bill, send it out as a notice with anything that goes out on a brightly colored piece of paper.
Yeah,
Really?
like our tax bill is the little tabbies already divided into two. So is that going to become, is there going to be a second little fold, bifold,
No,
or is it going to be divided into four? What were you saying?
There'll be 4 across the bottom.
Yeah.
Instead of 2.
But I think what Pam is saying, when the water bill goes out for the next quarter, especially if I don't know what the timing of all this is. This is something that Carrie would have to work out. But first of all, the council has to vote before the end of the month to put this on to warn this article. So it has to happen. But then when, to Pam's point, depending on when the next water bill goes out, having something in there that says we are voting, or even if we have to do a mailing something that says we're voting on this, and this is why, this is what our savings could potentially be to help us with our tax rate, not the water. Well, it has to be very clear that this is for the tax, the general, and
it should go out in everything the city sends out for at least the next year.
Yep.
Right.
And of course, there's always those people who say, well, what do we do about escrow payments? Mortgage companies are so used to doing this, it's not even, it's a moot point.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Lori. That's a good note to end on. And thanks everybody for this helpful, constructive. We're just doing better on and up. So thank you all for the efforts that go into that.
Carter, in the RFP, look for the word select space board and change it to city council.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
All right.
Thank you. All right. Have good Wednesdays, y'all. Bye.
See ya.
Good day.